Your space doesn't feel cramped because it is small. It feels cramped because of what your brain is doing every single time you walk through that door. And I know that sounds like a bold claim, but stay with me because once you understand the psychology behind why certain spaces feel open and airy while others feel like they are closing in on you, you will have the tools to change yours without knocking down walls, without major renovations, and without spending money you don't have. I am going to walk you through the exact principles designers use to change how the brain perceives spaces, not tricks, not Pinterest hacks, actual psychological science applied to your home. And I want to start with the principle that surprises people the most because it has nothing to do with furniture, color, or square footage. But before we get into that, I want you to understand something very important about your small space. Most of the decorative advice gets things completely wrong because it treats space as a fixed thing, something you either have or you don't. But space is not fixed, space is perceived, and your brain is the one thing doing the perceiving. Every time you walk into a room, your brain makes a decision in less than a second, and the variables it chooses to reach that decisions are not the ones you would expect. It's not your floor plan, it's not how many pieces of furniture you have, it's the quality of signals you're sending to the nervous system through light, through scales, through visual noise, through the negative space between objects. So these are the levers that designers have always known how to pull, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to pull them yourselves in your own homes. The first lever is the one your eye is most sensitive to. It's called visual noise, and it's quietly making your room feel smaller every single day. Visual noise is everything your eye has to process that isn't intentionally serving the space. A clutter of object on the kitchen counter, four different patterns competing for attention on the same sofa, cables trailing across the floor, or a shelf where nothing has a clear home. None of these things are catastrophic individually. Together, they create what psychologists call it cognitive load, a mental weight, and your brain reads that weight as crowding. Think about the last time you walked into a hotel room and felt that immediate sense of openness. That wasn't because the room was large. Most hotel rooms aren't. It was because there was almost nothing for your brain to process. Every surface was clear, every object had a purpose, your eye could travel the entire room without friction. And when the eye moves freely, the brain maps the space as open. This is why reducing visual noise is not just a tidying habit, it is a design decision with a psychological outcome. When there is less for your eye to catalog, the room feels larger without a single physical thing changing. But I want you to keep that thought because clearing the clutter is the foundation. And what I'm going to share next is the invisible mistake that keeps rooms feeling tight even after every surface is completely clear. The invisible mistake I'm talking about is scale, and this is the one designers catch the moment they walk into a room, and most homeowners simply cannot see. When furniture is the wrong scale for a space, the room, fights itself. A sofa that's too large doesn't just occupy floor space. It visually compresses everything around it. The walls appear closer. The ceiling feels lower. Your brain registers the contrast between that oversized piece and the remaining space, and it reads that contrast as tightness, as constraint. What's equally important to understand is that wrong scale works both ways. A room furnished with pieces that are too small, delicate little chairs, a narrow sofa against a wide wall, a coffee table that barely registers, reads as just as uncomfortable because the brain is always looking for visual balance. It wants the furniture to feel like it belongs to the room. When pieces are undersized, empty space around them doesn't feel airy. It feels unresolved, and unresolved space reads as awkward, not open. The principle designers use is this: anchor the room with one correct scale piece, a sofa that feels but doesn't overwhelm the main wall, a dining table that allows chairs to pull out without crowding the room, one hero piece that tells the brain this piece is inhabited intentionally, not just filled. And once that anchor is right, everything else has a foundation to build on. But what you layer on top of that foundation, specifically how you light it, is where the transformation really happens, because lighting is not just a practical decision. It is one of the powerful spatial illusion your brain will fall for every single time. Let me tell you something about light that your brain has understood since before you could speak. Darkness means small, brightness means open. It is primal. Dark spaces feel enclosed because for most of human history, they were. Your nervous system reads low light as a signal to be alert, and an alert nervous system does not feel at ease, it feels contained. This is why the fastest way to make a room feel larger is not to rearrange the furniture, it is a layer of light. And most people make one critical mistake when it comes to lighting. They rely on the single overhead source in the center of the room. That one ceiling light creates a bright pool in the middle and lets the corners fall dark, and your brain reads these dark corners as walls moving in. What designers do instead is push light to the edges, a floor lamp in the corner, a table lamp at the eye level beside the sofa, a wall sconce near the doorway. When light lives at the perimeter of a room, it visually expands the boundaries. The eye follows the light outwards and the room stretches with it. If this is already shifting how you see your space, hit that subscribe button, because this is exactly the kind of design thinking I share here every single week. And I want you to stay with me, because what comes next operates on an even deeper level than light, because it doesn't just change what you see, it changes the direction your eye naturally travels. And that direction is everything when it comes to perceived space. Your eye as a default. When it enters a room, it scans horizontally, along furniture lines, along tops of sofas and beds, along shelves and ledges, and in a small space, that horizontal scan is the enemy of spaciousness, because horizontally, your room runs out very quickly, vertically. Designers have known this for decades, which is why almost every technique for adding perceived height has a vertical compound built in. Curtains hang just below the ceiling, not at the window frame, so the eye follows the fabric upward and the brain reads the full wall height as window height. Bookshelves that run all the way to the ceiling, artwork positioned slightly higher than feels instinctive, a tall, slender plant in a corner, even subtle vertical lines in a tile pattern or a wallpaper accent wall. Each of these is a deliberate visual cue that says, look up, and when the eye looks up, the brain adds height to its mental map of the room. The space feels taller, and taller, as any designer will tell you, always reads as larger. The concept underneath all of this is directional design. You are not just filling a room, you are directing where the eye travels, and when you understand that, the next principle becomes almost instinctive, because it is about what you make as the deliberate choice not to put in the room at all, and why that decision might be the most powerful one you ever make. Most design conversations are about what to add, what furniture, what color, what decor pieces to bring in. But in a small space, the most powerful design decisions you'll ever make is what to leave out. Negative spaces, the intentional empty areas around the between objects, is not a gap in your design, it is the design. And this is the principle that separates a room that feels designed from a room that simply feels decorated. When every wall has something on it, every surface has something on it, and every corner has something filling it, your brain has nowhere to rest. It reads the room as complete, which in a small space means overloaded. When you leave a wall bare, keep a surface clear, let a corner breathe, you create visual pauses. Those pauses are where the brain exhales, where the room opens up, where the space stops feeling like it needs you to fix it. The approach I always come back to is this: style in restraints and leave more empty than feels comfortable. Three considered objects on a shelf and the rest of the shelf bare, a gallery wall on one side of the room and the opposite wall with nothing. One styled vignette on the coffee table, the surface clear around it. The restraints is not emptiness, it is intention. And that intention paired with one final principle is what completes the picture your brain is building of your space. Color is where most people either unlock their space or accidentally seal it shut. And the reason again comes back to how the brain processes visually or visual information. Warm, dark, saturated colors absorb light and visually advance towards you. A deep navy, a rich terracotta, a dramatic forest green in a large room. This creates atmospheric intimacy. In a small room, they do something else. They bring the walls closer, not metaphorically, visually. The brain is reading the constraints and depth of that color and mapping the wall as nearer than it actually is. Cool light, muted tones do the opposite. Soft white, warm creams, pale greige, dusty sage, these colors reflect light. They recede, and when the wall recedes, the brain adds space to the room. Space that doesn't physically exist. This is not aesthetic preference. It is how the visual cortex processes depth. What takes this even further is tonal consistency. When the floor, the walls, and the ceiling live within the same color family, what designers call monochromatic palette, the boundaries of the room blur. The eye struggles to identify exactly where the floor ends and the wall begin, and that ambiguity reads as spaciousness. The room feels like one continuous, intentional, and designed environment, and not a small box with hard edges. Now, if I had to tell you where to start, and I know you want a practical answer, not just theory, here is my honest opinion. The easiest change you can make today is lighting. Move a lamp to the darkest corner of your most used room. Use it instead of or alongside the overhead light. That single shift will change how the room feels before you rearrange a single place or piece of furniture. The most impactful long term investment is getting the scale right. Before you buy anything new for your home, measure, understand the proportions of your room. One correctly scaled sofa or dining table will do more for the feel of your space than 20 decorated items combined. It is the decision most people skip, and it is the one that holds everything else back. And if you are a renter, if you can't paint, can't drill, can't change the bones of the room, your power is in the negative space and vertical cues. Edit down what you have. Hang your curtains higher. Bring in one tall plant. Use a light, neutral palette in your soft furnishings. Your floor plan does not determine how your home feels. Your design decisions do. That is the psychology of small spaces. And now that you understand it, I promise you, you cannot walk into a room without seeing it. This is what we do here. Practical designs for real homes on real budgets. I'll see you in the next one.